Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is currently November 29th, 2009, and we are at Day 9 Daily number 25. I've done 25 of these things. That takes 5 full hands to mark how many of these things I have done, and we will be doing Fantasy versus Calm on Matchpoint coming right up here. So let me just sync everything up, and I will say we are having a little bit of an error going on right now. Here I am. Hello, everyone. We have a little bit of an error going on right now. Apparently, it is permanently locked, saying that I have 73 viewers, but fortunately, I have my studio open, so we're actually at 223 viewers. So I've been apparently locked at 73 viewers for a while. Excuse me, it says that I've been at 73 viewers for like a long time, which is totally wrong, but just wanted to clear that up, just in case all of you thought that I've always had exactly 73 viewers. That's not quite accurate. And today, we're doing Fantasy versus Calm. And it's a game that is beautiful and breaks my heart at the same time, right? This incredible strategy by Calm, I loved it. It was incredible. I just something that makes me want to have more free time so I can play again and just start practicing exactly what he did. Unfortunately, it's also an amazing showcase of how to choke in an important match. And I mean, like, it hurts so bad to see it happen because it's happened to me so many times throughout my career playing. So I want the theme of this to be choking under pressure. So for those of you who aren't familiar with what led up to this, Calm played against Fantasy in the OSL not long ago, actually probably less than a week ago. And they played on Eye of the Storm, and everything seemed to be going okay for Calm. He did this amazing no Mutalisk build. He techs straight to Lurkers when he gets his lair, and he's done this several times on Neo Harmony. Once when STX was trying to make their way to the Pro League Finals, and also once in the Pro League against Iris, just in a regular old game. And especially that game on Neo Harmony, Calm vs. Iris. Watch it. Unbelievable game by Calm. Basically, Calm gets Lurkers instead of Mutalisks and expands multiple times and techs to Hive immediately. I can't go into too much description of that right now because, again, the focus is on this match, but wonderful way to play. But unfortunately, something backfired when Calm played against Fantasy because I could see he was doing the same thing. It was identical in timing and everything. But I think he forgot Lurker upgrade because I actually have mimicked the build and have done it quite a few times after seeing him do it. And I don't know what happened. He just didn't get the Lurkers up in time. Actually, they were like 4 minutes late, something absurd like that. And he ended up losing this disgusting game. It was like embarrassing, like 125 food to 40 food. So then Calm and Fantasy play again in the Pro League. And in Game 4, Calm's team was down 0-2 after games 1 and 2. And then in Game 3, Call wins. So STX is still down 1-2. And then it's Calm versus Fantasy. So Calm really needs to prove that he can beat Fantasy. And he does. This stunning game on Tornado. That's also really good. That unfortunately I won't be covering today. Very, very sexy play by Calm. And then we do the ace match. And it's Calm versus Fantasy again. So I'm like super happy. Because I'm like, yeah, Calm's going to show Fantasy who the boss is, right? And in this game, Calm opens up incredibly well, and I guess something got under his skin because he just fell apart. So I wanted to make sure everyone knew what the circumstances were because, again, the focus of all of this is going to be what it feels like to choke under pressure and what it looks like when you're choking under pressure. So let's just go over to the main screen right away. So I have the game loaded up here, but let's just take a look at match point. Right now, the Terran vs. Zerg statistics on it are 5-1 in favor of Terran, but I don't think that's going to stay that way for a very long time. It seems fairly reasonable from both players' perspectives. First of all, the reason that makes me, the reason I don't agree with Terran imbalance by any means on this map is that it pretty much is, it's like Blue Storm. I mean, it reminds me so much of Blue Storm. I mean, first of all, look at this. We have close rush distances like this, and we have long push distances like this. Also, we have these high ground pods, the exact same way that we have them in Blue Storm, and we need to control these high ground pods if we hope to defend our back gas expansion or our mineral expansion. And these little tiny chokes come into play very early on, and then very, very late in the game. You can see little counterattacks scooping up into here. Also, we just like Blue Storm, we have these two expansions that are sort of up for grabs, I guess you'd say. On this map, Match Point, it's a little bit more ambiguous who controls these expansions and that sort of thing. But yeah, I really, it feels very Blue Stormish. So in that case, since I have emphasized how much it's like Blue Storm, in Zerg vs. Terran, this mineral expansion becomes fairly important. Emphasizing taking this early and getting a lot of Zerglings is not only effective, but it's incredibly fun. I mean, because a lot of times you'll get in a situation in a normal sort of Zerg vs. Terran game where you'll have 4 hatches, and you'll be getting your 5th around the time you're getting Hive and that sort of thing, and you have a decent balance of Lurkers, Defilers, Zerglings, and Scourge. But if you can, in this case, because your Mineral Natural is so easy to defend, you can get that and get up to 7 or 8 hatcheries pretty quickly, and you just get so many Zerglings. We have so many Zerglings, it's so fun because you just attack, move, and then he's doing all this fancy micro, trying to dodge storms and all this sort, trying to dodge swarms and all this sort of thing, and it doesn't matter because you just have a bazillion, million, trillion Zerglings continuing to flood his face. So I'm immediately thinking of strategies that incorporate this as an important part of the game. Terran, there's a lot of standard things you can do. I don't like these high ground pods as Terran. Those sort of get on my nerves. You can do some cute push where you move up like this with your army, and then down a diagonal like this to try to take out this expansion. But you need to be careful with that, because around the time you end up taking out this expansion is around the time your opponent gets Dark Swarm, and you never want to be caught in that sort of situation where you're in this really narrow valley against Swarm. So I'll be spending a little bit of time discussing some early openings and some tactics and techniques, but I wanted to go ahead and get into the match since it's a little bit of a long one. So I would be cheering for Calm, but of course I know the results. It bums me out. Let me actually stretch this screen open just a little bit more. There we go. So yeah, a pretty good variety of things that you can open up with from both players. For instance, with Terran, you can open up with an early Bunker Rush. You can open up with like an 8 racks, like right here at your choke, and then wander Marines there. Try to do some damage, and if not, you retreat, and you can even do a wall at your front after the fact, and continue to expand normally. And again, I've said this a million times, but I'll say it the 1,000,001st time. I love stable follow-throughs, stable playoffs is what I normally call them. I love the idea of doing some sort of Bunker Rush, but not a Bunker Rush that needs to win, but a Bunker Rush that sets you up in a good position. And this map in particular, considering that rush distance is so close, you can do that sort of thing. Something we have not seen that I just figure I'll mention because, you know, why not? Oh, I see a little bit of lag coming up right here. I'm going to unmute and just make sure there's no severe lag coming up. It might just be my computer, but I just wanted to double check that. But yeah, so, I mean, something that could be mentioned but hasn't been mentioned so far is that you can do 2 factory openings and take advantage of this little narrow crack right there. 2 factory pushes early on seem reasonable to me. And even though we haven't seen that in a very long time, I like to occasionally bring up these somewhat unorthodox strategies because, as I like to put it, there are bits of truth in them. Even though they've been sort of out of the loop and we see all these other types of openings going on, the fact that they were used at some point in time with some limited success reveals that there is bits of truth in these strategies, that there are effective aspects of them. For instance, we've seen Dragoon Reaver and Protoss vs. Zerg suddenly have a recent rise in popularity. We actually saw Anytime and, oh, who's the other player? Yes, Call do it against Hyuk in both cases, and Hyuk got his face smashed apart. And that's why it's important to bring up these sorts of things, because a lot of times you'll develop this sort of strategy from Zerg, you know, like just a very standard 2-hatch straight to Mutalisk tech, and you'll ignore the possibility of a fast 2-factory push. And I don't mean with vultures, I mean like tanks and vultures directly pushing your front. And because you neglect that, it takes you completely by surprise, and it turns out that you might not have as stable of a build as you once thought you did. So fortunately, I got to go on that tangent because both players, as I remembered, have opened up in a very normal fashion. Briefly note these Overlord scouting patterns. The first Overlord's going straight to check this expansion. It's actually going to hide behind this ridge and check the expansion. And if there is no expansion, it's going to poach a little bit farther forward down here. The second Overlord scouts this way just to make sure that there are in fact no factories being built here that are threatening to float on over. Don't really need to make that many Zerglings at this stage because this Overlord flew right over the early scout path. Same sort of thing for Terran point of view. This SCV is getting a lot of good information, so he's going to go ahead and throw down this second barracks. We don't need to be building a bunker that early. Sometimes sometimes players build the bunker before the second barracks, not necessary all the time, especially in this circumstance. Right now, I would kind of be like, oh my god, I saw these Zerglings go by. Gee, they're not following my SCV. I mean, that's why the SCV is going all the way up here, is to pull the Zerglings as far up as possible. So right now as Terran, I would think about it's time to build a bunker, which is in fact what we see. And fortunately, my timing on the cut of that was perfect. Yeah. But see, look at this. Just Zerg's act of going down a little bit and then coming back up forced Terran to maybe build a bunker earlier than he would have. Little things like that I obsess about. I love the sorts of very, very subtle advantages that we have going on. Now, as Zerg, we have a few options right now. We can go ahead and start getting a bunch of Zerglings with speed, like maybe 12, sometimes 14, 16, but I honestly feel like that's pushing it a little bit. And then we can get a second gas here and really focus hard on getting a bunch of harassment early. But a lot of players have become increasingly good at holding that off, so we see no gas here. Instead, focusing on minerals, not a lot of Zerglings, focusing on drones, and that way we can get this expansion out a little bit earlier. So I would call that a little bit more economical of a 2-hatch Mutalisk play. Everything's as standard as can be from Fantasy at this point. I mean, he's going for the 2 racks. He's getting his academy at about the normal time. But one thing that is important to note is that given the structure of this map, if Terran starts to be aggressive, Zerg does have to pull back. Let's actually pause for a moment and imagine that Zerg's starting position was down here. And Zerg was packed in this corner, and Terran was packed in this corner. So like on a map like Tornado is something where we see something like that, or Katrina. So let's say Zerg's tucked away here. If Terran starts to move out with a Medic Marine force, Zerg can do all sorts of harassment in Terran's main, and then just slip right back across for defense. But on match point, since Zerg is in fact all the way over here, when Terran moves out with Medic Marine, the Mutalisks literally have to stop harassing. The harassment's actually dangerous to do because the Medic Marine army will just go ahead and hit the front and kill you, really. So, in this map in particular, I do like a play as Terran, is to just take your original 2 barracks worth of Medic Marine, and just move forward at around this time, right before the Spire finishes, and then Zerg's Mutalisks are pinned back here for defense. God, I gotta oil this chair. It is the creakiest thing in the universe. Listen to this thing. Oh, God. I promise I'll go get some WD-40 at some point in the future. Always good to be casting with a can of WD-40, especially if my voice starts to crack. I can just spray some right down there. No big deal. Look at this great placement right there, that supply depot. Actually, I'm going to rewind and just talk about how awesome that is. So we're going to see the Zerglings poking around. But this supply depot right here, this is another thing that I would say wins games. I mean, really, if you position just a few units here, the Zerglings have almost no space to attack this bunker. The bunker's touching the command center. It's walled on this side. A Zergling might be able to squeeze through there, but really a lot of repair space open for the SCVs. Beautiful, beautiful positioning of that supply depot. And, you know, putting a supply depot there can't be bad. I mean, a lot of players are leery of building supply depots as a wall-in because they say, oh, if he gets lurkers, he'll kill them off, but that's much less of a concern when you're early expanding, because you will have a lot more control with your Marine count, so you don't need to worry about losing that supply depot too much. So we have the usual Mutalisk coming out. Very standard, and at this point, this is my take on the game. Everything's going very standardly from both players. Fantasy is going to potentially stay back for defense, but wouldn't be surprised if he moved out into the middle. And Zerg is going to be teching for a hive off his 3 hatches. And this is actually a very normal thing for Zergs to do. They tech to hive when they have 3 hatches after they have opened with 2-hatch Mutalisks. They have these 3 hatches at 3 bases. They tech straight to a hive, straight to the Defiler and the Evo chamber. And then they add on 2 more hatcheries and get the usual 5 hatchery count with the hive tech. That's the very standard play, because basically you harass with Mutalisks, and then you get the lurkers out to prevent any early pushing, but then, because you've been so low on hatches for so long, you need the Defilers to come out quickly in order to defend it. That's why we do that play as Zerg. And then we get the next 2 hatches a little while later. Quanro did this quite a bit, especially around the time when Holy World was a map. Quanro was very, very good at timing that. So I was expecting something like that. Adding on more Mutalisks for the harass. Again, very much like Blue Storm. Hopefully we'll get very much like Blue Storm. There's very little room back here to build turrets, so Mutalisk harass is pretty good. You get to keep pretty good tabs on, you see this Medic Marine blob coming out here, you get to keep pretty good tabs on that moving out, and you can pop back here with your Mutalisk to defend. But immediately, I looked at the mini-map at this point, and I was like, oh my god, what a brilliant opening by Calm to take advantage of that mineral expansion right there. Oh, and good snipe. At this stage in the game, because again, we are pretty far across, and these Mutalisks suddenly seemed less like something that we're trying to do some sort of insane harassment to kill off a bazillion buildings, but instead were something that were going to be used defensively in order to keep all these expansions alive. So I was fully expecting the Zerg to maybe get his Hydralisk Den out about now, but he didn't. So right now, I'm starting to feel a little bit nervous, because I'm like, ooh, man, I really want Calm to win. I really think he needs a Hydralisk Den about now. And so, in my eyes, the only way he's going to be able to defend this is if he keeps making Mutalisks. He needs some sort of unit that's muscular enough, such as Mutalisk plus Zerglings, or even just enough Mutalisks, to hold off this sort of pushing going on from this Medic Marine group. So see, here's from the Terran's perspective. Look at this. Everything's going very normal by Fantasy. Usual 3 barracks into factory. Just got started. But because he's moving out with this group of Medic Marine, he doesn't have to worry so much about building turrets in his main, because this is such a scary force. Terran might not necessarily do a ton of damage. He might not really kill these expansions off, but he's pulling these Mutalisks back, in a sense, pinning them to defense. And see, at this point, I was like, okay, Calm really does have a good sense of what's going on. Whoopsie daisies, just giving some free Mutalisks. But Calm is continuing to make Mutalisks. I love that. That's sexy, very suave, good for you. And these Mutalisks are going to help him out tremendously. And look at this. That's when you know when a player is really feeling confident and has practiced a build. When there's all these Medic Marine in the middle of the map, you know, your attack has not even quite gotten up. That Hydralisk Den only just finished. That just finished. But then we go back, we look at this bottom expansion, and look, he's still making drones. Look how many drones he has here. Incredible sign of confidence in his play that he's willing to make drones at that stage in the game. And that honestly should be your goal whenever you're playing this sort of defensive style of Zerg, whether it be opening with Mutalisks or having opened with Lurkers. If you can, you should focus on seeing how many drones you can squeeze out, and that should always be your emphasis. Not so much how much damage you can do with these Mutalisks, because they'll always do a reasonable amount, but instead how much you can get away with economically. Usual sort of play going on. Now, if I'm Fantasy, what's going to be happening from my point of view? I'm going to be scanning these 3 bases and think, man, this guy has a wicked late Hydralisk Den, an unbelievably late Evo Chamber, and no Queen's Nest anywhere in sight. He's really not going to be scanning here, which is one of the advantages of this build, is that even though Calm's build is very stable, it's also very deceptive. Or should I say, it has the possibility for deception. Because not many Terran players are going to scan there. And even if they do, it doesn't suddenly put the Terran in super good shape. Adding on more hatcheries. No hive yet, and 5 hatches started construction before hive. Very, very, very early to be doing that. And again, a lot of it has to do with the fact that he's taken this mineral natural early. So at this stage in the game, I do like Fantasy's choice not to have this factory landed. He can keep it up in the air and go straight for the more mobile Medic Marine Science Vessel combination and really put pressure on this player who doesn't seem to have that many hatcheries. You know, it seems like he only has 1 here, 1 here, and 1 here. So I really stand by that choice. Again, that's the power of deception that Calm's build is doing. And suddenly we have this big troop of Medic Marine lost in the middle. A lot of that has to do with the fact that Calm did upgrade the +1 attack, +1 Carapace upgrade. He has super mutas, the strongest mutas in the world. Going to be a real big difficulty to contest with that sort of might of Mutalisks, just for the alliteration. So now all of a sudden, having lost that big Medic Marine group in the middle, these turrets have to be built. A lot of money was lost from Fantasy at this stage. So really, I'm watching this game and I'm going, yes. And oh my god, look, in the midst of all of that, even more drones being made. And honestly, you could probably even afford a 7th hatch right there. That's quite standard, especially on Blue Storm. That was very typical. And on Match Point, there's no reason why you can't do that. 6 hatcheries before Hive. Just going to be going for muscle right now. And look, these Mutalisks are trying to poke in and do some damage, but they're not forcing their way in there. I mean, we aren't seeing these Mutalisks run in and try to sacrifice themselves to get anywhere. More barracks being added from Fantasy. probably, I'm actually going to pause right here. Some of you are noting right now that I'm talking a lot about Calm and very little about Fantasy. And that's actually specifically why I chose this game. I mean, I'm obviously going to mention a few tidbits about Fantasy, but what amazes me is how standardly Fantasy played this game. There was nothing unusual. All the timings were set in stone. He didn't do that weird 3 Wraith stuff he did versus Hoja or Hudja or Hoochie or however you say his name. He just plays the most normal way in the world as Terran. And what we see from Calm is pure brilliance in the opening, exploiting this standard sort of play. And actually, let me back up a little bit. Exploiting the standard sort of play that a Terran would do. But then also Calm falling apart to the standard play later in the game. And look, no scan right there. That's why I rewinded. No scan whatsoever. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful game. Wonderful, wonderful game. I just love Calm's opening right here. And honestly, I do tend to like these sorts of bigger mid-game army builds. I'm someone who doesn't even really like 2-hatch Muta-ing because I just prefer 3-hatch because I just have more stuff. I'm more comfortable with it. I just love having so many Zerglings and continuing to attack move and everything. And this position is just awful for Terran to be in. So you currently don't have any tanks. You're going straight for what you think is a very mobile army to combat a very tech-heavy army. And instead what you have is a mobile army that cannot deal with this many units, with tons of Lurkers, Mutalisks, and Zerglings. It's going to be such a pain in the ass to combat. But starting in just a little bit, I started to question Calm's decision-making. And we're actually going to see Calm take this bottom here pretty early on. And by the way, if you're in Calm's situation, there's nothing wrong with adding a 7th hatch before you take that, either the top or the bottom expo. So here we have Calm trying to do some cool stuff here. This I actually like. This is good. We're poking in here, trying to do some damage. Doing quite a bit. I would have preferred to see Zerglings come in here, because I always hate Muta Lurker just naked like this, because then you end up in these situations where you can't really push anywhere. And for some reason there's a bunch of units just hanging out there. I'm sure they'll end up coming here eventually, but this is the sort of stuff that I guess I like, but I'd prefer to have some more Zerglings in here. I feel like that's getting a little over-eager with unit count. By far the biggest mistake players make when they're doing some sort of big mid-game Zerg-style army is that they try to do early attacks like this, because it looks like, hey, maybe I can break the Terran. Most of the time you can't, and you end up losing. In this case, Calm lost 8 or 9 Lurkers. That is way too many Lurkers to be wanting to lose in the mid-game. There's a very famous game in the Pro League finals of July versus Kanata on Arcadia. I actually think everyone should go watch that game after this. July does a big army like this with Mutas, Lurkers, and Zerglings, but moves in the mid-game, doesn't break Kanata, and as a result, loses the game. That's what loses him his momentum. Because, for instance, right now, look at this. Let's pause for a minute, remember this scene, right? We have a bunch of Zerglings and Lurkers coming from the top, we have a bunch of Lurkers and Zerglings coming from below, and then let's go back and look at this map. If Zerg decided instead to just burrow Lurkers here, and burrow Lurkers here, and then just expand here, right now there's almost no way Zerg's going to be broken here or here with any ease. Terran really needs to push hard with a bunch of tanks, vessels, and a really big army to secure up here or down here. So if Zerg has this position, and is already on the way for Defilers, we pretty much just get to waltz a Defiler and start pushing from here into the Terran's base. As opposed to doing this big push, which dies, and then having to retreat back to here. So see, this sort of thing, really cool, like, oh man, maybe he's going to break in there. And this stuff makes you feel powerful as a Zerg player. You feel like you're really getting in your opponent's face. Fortunately, it ends up working, I guess, is how a lot of people would see it. I mean, but even then, look at this. Terran player still has a pretty decent army, 3 science vessels, and what does Zerg have? Zerg has just 5 Lurkers, which have to retreat. So that might seem like it worked, but really, I mean, what position is Zerg in now? This Terran has free movement here and up here. And see, there's Calm taking the bottom. And still in this situation, I was like, yeah, Calm, you're looking good. I want to rephrase that. He's looking good, but might not be in the best mindset. He just did 2 pushes at Terran's front with a clear advantage, and neither of them worked very well at all. So he's doing the right thing. He's moving more units down here. I maybe would have opted to expand to the top instead of the bottom, but I'll come back to that probably after the game. Or if it seems relevant, I'll end up bringing it up. But yeah, so look at how big this gob is for Zerg. And this is just real sloppy. Just sending in these 4 overlords to die, I mean, that's sort of bad. So I actually am going to stop and be as critical as humanly possible of Kalm's position. If we look at Kalm's position, we have almost no vision here covering if units are coming down from this lane. We have no, this is probably the worst error, we have no overlords and Scourge here. One of the biggest advantages that you'll have if you do this sort of big army style instead of just fast tech to defiler style is that you can position units right around here and then freely have overlords and Scourge at these positions around the map to defend from drops. Also, these lurkers up here, which are right down here on the mini-map, are cut off from this army. So look, it kind of has to run back and retreat. And now we're starting to see what I was mentioning earlier. Fantasy killed off 2 attacks, and now Fantasy gets to move forward, and this push by Zerg is now coming from middle of the map, as opposed to right outside Fantasy's base. And the usual sort of cool pushing little action. It's kind of funny that all these Zerglings went up instead of at these Marines. That surround should have been better. I am being very critical of Kalm, but having played exactly this sort of style so many times, that is one of the biggest differences between winning and losing. And also, this is terrible. Clearly, there was some sort of attack move directly into the main that went on. And as a result, he boxed in some overlords here. And look at this. Look at this sloppy coverage. Absolutely no sight of that dropship whatsoever. But, I mean, look how many units Kalm has. It's not like we're doing some sort of fast tech to hive. Because when you're doing a fast tech to hive, you kind of have to say, okay, Terran, you get the center of the map. I don't have enough units to defend it. But I will have defilers soon, and then I can push you out of the middle of the map, or maybe around the middle of the map, or that sort of thing. If you have a huge army like Kalm, you just have the middle. It's yours. And Terran's whole goal is to try to break your middle army in some sort of slow but sure fashion. In this case, I mean, look at this. Look how many units Kalm has. Kalm has total control over the middle, and hence should have total vision and be very attentive for these dropships moving around. Very, very sloppy to have let this dropship move. Still at this point, I think Kalm's playing okay. Look at how these units are positioned here. He has units from the front and the back, very patiently awaiting to crunch this. But I think this is maybe the moment where for some reason something got into Kalm's head and he just fell apart. I mean, look, so here's the crunch going on here. Beautiful job. Look at this. Just Zerglings. Just Zerglings rips all this to shreds. Doesn't even need the lurkers. That's why I really love these center control styles, especially once you get that +1 carapace upgrade for Zerglings, which, and I will pause this to say, +1 carapace not only helps you take more hits from Marines, but suddenly 1 tank from a shot does not kill a Zergling. It takes 2 tank shots to kill a Zergling. Really, really big, very important aspect of +1 upgrade for Zerg. Got to be able to take multiple tank shots of Zerglings, or else they just kind of spatter all over the place. Yeah, more dropship harass coming up here. And see, look. Oh my god, I just lost my expansion. I guess I need defense from air. And actually, if you look at this mini-map, only now are we starting to see some overlords do a little bit more movement up here after that dropship died. So late, so sloppy. Still, though, look at this position Kalm's in. Still not bad. And we are now seeing the slow downward fall of Kalm. By the way, if you ever do this sort of center, big army stuff, it's entirely fine to get the +1 the +1 speed upgrade for your overlords. Excuse me, the only speed upgrade for your overlords. Here we see a push attempt by Kalm, but this is what was weird to me about this push. He's trying to sneak up here. Clearly, Terrans are always going to be aware of this. But look at all these units here and all these units here that are just hanging out, not doing anything. That was weird to me. There's no reason to do a defiler push with just some of your stuff. I mean, see, here's even more units that are just hanging out here. That was quite a long time to rebuild that hatchery. That's very late. We see no larva, no eggs being made out of these larvae, just 3 idle larvae. And Fantasy is doing the most normal stuff in the world, just trying to get some ground space with his army, trying to get some control over the middle. Bouncing back and forth here, sending dropships, and these dropships, watch this dropship. It's going to happen a little bit later, but it's just basically going to walk here. Just a straight line, completely vulnerable to Scourge, but not a single Scourge in sight. And look at this. This center army is not being positioned very well. Ideally, what we'd want, if we look back at the map, is when our opponent moves here, we pull back with some stuff here and some stuff here. So that way, whether he chooses to go up, we can hit him from behind like this and from atop like this, or if the Terran comes down this way, the Zerg can hit from the front like this or from behind like that. But somehow he ended up pulling back here and miraculously manages to get over to this expansion in time. That is seriously a miracle. A lot of Terran players wouldn't let that happen. They would cut you off right here. And I'm not saying Fantasy necessarily did something wrong. It was just sort of like, wow, Call moved his units just in time in order to get around there. Fantasy, I'm certain, would have exploited it if he'd had that opportunity to. Part of what might be a potential issue with doing this with so many hatches and so many Zerglings is that you might not be used to it as Zerg, having that size of army. So we see, a push now coming forward for Calm, but we see these units, again, completely still, not doing anything. It's almost like he has tunnel vision. He's just focusing on one thing at a time. So we have some more movement here. This thing is only finally just getting finished. Fantasy always tilts his head a little bit to the side. I always worry about those muscles in his neck, because I seriously have been getting some neck problems, and I just worry about people. I ended up not mentioning this dropship, but let's just watch this dropship. This is pretty good by Fantasy. See, here's the dropship right there. He has some units here to defend it, but look at this dropship. I'm wandering. I'll move my mouse just a little bit out of the way so you can see it. Look, just heading right up there. Yeah, great. Look at this completely undefended area that Scourge and Overlords should have been positioned by. Because if you look at the map, you can have Overlords poaching out just a little bit like this. So you end up having vision to about here. Instead, there's one Overlord that just has vision here and no Scourge anywhere. And now I think this is when the panic really started to set in. When Calm loses this bottom right expansion right there, you probably think to yourself, man, that was really sloppy, but you know what? I have 4 bases already. I just lost my 5th. I can retake that and I can be calm. But then watch this. All these Zerglings start swarming up here. No micro. 0 micro. This is very easy to happen when you're panicking. Just to go, fuck it, go, and then just box some units and send them away. You should really just take an extra 2 seconds just to group and surround in an efficient way, because then this sort of stuff can happen where you get some double-digit kill Marine. And see, here's this push coming down at this bottom side. This is standard good attacking by Fantasy. Dropping here and then doing a push down here. Normal. Most normal thing in the world. Fantasy's doing an incredibly high level, very good job of it. I don't want to demean his play at all, but this is normal by Fantasy. This is the sort of stuff that you need to expect when you're playing Zerg. That, oh yeah, Terran's definitely going to be doing this sort of stuff. So, because there was just some Zerglings hanging out and not enough of the muscle units, this expansion's now going to fall. In my eyes, if you take this expansion, you need to have units rallied here, and they should be bouncing back and forth between here. Instead of going up like this and coming down, you should be more focused on pushing up this way, because not only is it a short distance for defilers, but it also ensures that you have all these bases covered. If you want to be more aggressive and stuff, take this expansion. So that way you can move up like this, and by being aggressive, you defend that expansion. Things to think about. Also on Blue Storm, you see this a lot, that when a player is going for 2 Hatch Mutalisk, he expands to the top and bottom expansion that is closest to his opponent. So for instance, on this map, you might see something like a Zerg player who's going 2 Hatch Mutalisk, comfortable expanding right here. By the way, I'm not saying do this, I'm just doing this as kind of an example. But you'd expand here because your Mutalisks are doing all the harass here anyways, so that makes it most easily defendable. On Blue Storm, that's very common to do. On this map, you obviously don't want to because these distances are actually really, 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 really short. But these Marines, what are these guys still doing here? Really bad. And only now do we have... Look at this Calm going, aha, yes, after the fact. These things should have been here. You never want to be in that situation where you're realizing after the fact, wow, I really should have had this side defended. And then you don't, and you lose a bunch of stuff, and then you spend resources defending something that's already happened, so, big gross situation. So now here's a weird spot for Zerg to be in, once we get off the players' faces. Okay, so let's go back to the map. We have our units rallied here. We need to defend this alley in order to make sure that this expansion doesn't get attacked like that. See, Terran moves right like this, Zoink moves up like this. So it's very easy when you have these four to only focus on attacking this way, or to focus on attacking this way, and to forget that any units that swing around here can kill this. Again, part of the reason why I think Calm took this expansion, because hell, I have to defend this alley anyways, I may as well expand here. But it seems like Calm forgets about that around this point. Oh god, it just breaks my heart to see this happen. So here's some more tactics being abused right here by Fantasy, just kind of threatening this little bridge. Don't have to do an attack, just have to have the threat of the attack. And, I mean, we already saw some disorganization with killing off this drop here. We're going to see even more disorganization down at this bottom half of the map. See, here's another dropship coming in. That's what should have happened to that first dropship. It should have done nothing, and Zerg should have been like, awesome, I want you to try to drop me because this is so well defended. And these overlords didn't have to be super far out. The Scourge didn't have to be way out in, in the center of the map to catch the dropship. It was just kind of right here at the ridge. The normal thing. And it ends up being completely effective. I haven't seen a second Evo chamber here. I may have just missed that, but if it is the case that he forgot that second Evo chamber, that's obviously very bad. And see, look right now. Look at this position that Zerg's in. These units are completely ignoring this bottom vulnerable path. And that's going to end up biting Calm in the butt right here. So yeah, Zerg's feeling all content. He killed this thing off. He's going to try to do some magic here, but not too much is going to come out of it. And Fantasy literally gets to walk right here. I was shocked when Calm lost this bottom expansion. This bottom expansion should never be lost. There was no Nidus Canal there at all. And just a brief note on Nidus Canals. If all your units are rallied here, you don't have to have any shame about having a Nidus from here to here, or from here to here. That actually is a huge benefit, because really, if you're trying to funnel units up this thin ramp, you occasionally have pains in the asses here. You want to really have units come from inside of the expansion and explode out. But no Nidus Canals anywhere in sight for Calm. Very, very sloppy not to have done this. Now look at this. A bunch of Zerglings with no lurkers. I mean, I guess we could have argued that these Zerglings were going to be used to kill off these vessels, but we really need to try to make a push down here. And I'm not focusing too much on what Fantasy's doing here. He's doing the usual expansion timing. We have Calm trying to do some stuff to kill off the top left expansion, trying to delay that a little bit. But really, look at this. How is this happening? Oh my god. Worst feeling in the world when suddenly you go, oh yeah, I kind of forgot to defend my expansion. And look at this. I'm going to rewind this, and we're going to watch this just a few times. So see, there's the units wandering around the bottom. Here's the plague. Watch how only like a third of these units come down to defend this expansion. And also think about how this bottom expansion would have been so much safer if there was a Nidus there to defend. Yuck. Grody. Yeah, see, look, here comes just these units that are hotkeyed plus one more box. And yeah, he's going to send these things away, but ignore this battle for just a moment, because I'm going to rewind it yet again. Look at these units in the middle of the map. Look at them. Look at them just sitting. Nothing. No movement. None. Zero. Calm's trying to think. He's trying to focus. Look, burrowing two lurkers. Where are the rest of these Zerglings? We have some more stuff. Look at this. Still no movement. And suddenly, 12 things come? Look at this. Okay, I want to show that first 12 things came, then these Scourge got sent out, and then the rest came. That is really ugly. And yeah, this looks neat, but as Zerg, you've been cut down to 2 gases and a mineral base when you were at 5 bases not long ago. And we're going to rewatch this just one more time. Further driving home my point of having a Nidus here. If we have a Nidus here and maybe a Sunken here, delays it just a little bit, and we have a huge explosion of units from inside killing this off. But instead, look at this top ramp. Watch these fire bats. just waltzing right up here. A lot of them are going to fall, but look at this. Look how much died right here at the ramp. Look how much blood is here. Oh my god. It is so bad to have to deal with ramps like that. You just get a Nidus. It's just like 150. And it's going to save you so much. So at this point, I was just blown away. I was like, how on earth did Calm lose this game? The only explanation is choke. That is the only way we can explain the fact that a drop got down here, killed this off, a drop got up there, killed that off, that we lost control of this center portion, that this expansion died, that all these attacks failed here, that when this second attack happened, the things got split in half, and most of Calm's units didn't even go. I mean, think about how much stuff I just listed in that, like, 1 minute period. That, like, it's so much that Calm just... It's sloppy, is what it is. And it saddens me, because I love Calm. He's so fun to play like. But, I mean, at this stage, there's really nothing you can do. Some Terran players might think, oh, well, should I be adding on Fire Bats at this stage? You should be adding on whatever you want at this stage. I guess it is a little bit better to be adding on Fire Bats, now that we know our opponent only really has minerals and is going to be low on gas. But yuck, yuck, yuck. I mean, I think I'm going to start going through this a little bit more quickly. Yeah, so there's the good game here. Just depressing. I mean, losing this expansion. I felt really bad for Calm, because, I mean, this has happened to everyone, this sort of game, but it's really useful to see a pro do, not only to realize, wow, it's not just me, that this can happen to anyone, and also so that way we can see, from an objective standpoint, what's happening, and sort of label these actions as, wow, that's really, really bad. Let's think of ways to repair that. So here's the first early stage where Calm got a little bit thrown off, and now I'm going to open this thing up for questions. I have 516 viewers right now, even though it says 73. Don't believe every number you read. Yeah, losing this off. Calm does a good job of continuing to defend this lane. It seems like he hasn't lost focus, but no Nidus here. No Nidus whatsoever. And then we continue to see this army move down here. This army's a little late getting down here. It's a miracle, again, that these units were able to get down here in time. Oh god. And then here's the drop up in the main that's there forever. And then, I mean, really, I think this is one of the most significant parts that I don't think I griped about enough. We have this attack up here in the middle that effectively kills off some units here at the cost of losing this expansion. And oh my god, you can easily keep this expansion. There's no reason to be losing this. I mean, where's the Nidus Canal is the easiest answer. I mean, and it's not like he didn't have time to build it. The creep is completely expanded here, so oh my god. This is just brutal. Oh, by the way, I briefly want to say, if any of you want to look at my old stream, just like the old setup, do livestream.com/StriderDoom/old. And there you go. Nice old setup. So yeah, we see more of Calm falling apart here. I mean, just a lot of falling apart. Like this, in particular, losing this bottom expansion, the drop here, the drop in the main, and letting this thing get in, strike me as four big mistakes. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and mute the chat just for 1 second, so that way I can take some of these fantastic questions. So yeah, so let's take Unknown's question. Unknown asks, in an earlier VOD, you stated that a Terran 200-200 army is superior to that of the other races. I agree with my statement. As a Zerg, how do you counter this? Is your whole game goal to whittle the Terran numbers down with your macro advantage? Or should you look to never allow that and to try to end the game before he's able to produce an army of that scale? Honestly, in Zerg vs. Terran, I don't think that's the sort of thing that you really should be focusing too much on. I think that's more of a Terran vs. Protoss issue, the fact that Terran really can turtle and push out at 170, 180 food, and there's a really difficult time for Terran to deal with that. So although I do think that a max Terran army is a little stronger than a Zerg army, if you just have some good swarms with your defilers and in particular good plagues, you're gonna be just fine. I think that your main goal in Zerg vs. Terran, again, to sort of throw build orders out the window and just think about how the mid game and on functions. It's really good to think about first of all how to stay alive from the first Terran's mid game push. Then how to get another expansion during or after that, and then how to push back against Terran. So, let's do a very standard way to play. 2-hatch Mutalisk into a 3rd hatch, straight into Hive with Defilers. Sorry, that's awfully loud. No worries. Sorry, my girlfriend's eating candy or something in the room. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, so in that case where you open up with Mutalisk and you do that sort of harassment, you then get the Lurkers immediately to hold off some sort of pushing, and then... Sorry, people are teasing me now, and it's funny. And then right after that, you get the Defilers, because the Defilers are how you're going to hold off the mid-game push. You slowly add on 2 more hatcheries, and you kind of try to do some pushing action with the Defilers, but you're mainly being defensive. And then once you slowly get your macro up, then you push it forth. In an alternative, suppose we open up with Hydra Lurker. We have a big Hydra Lurker army, and that's how we kill off the mid-game army. And then, later on when we get Defilers, more expansions, then we push back. Those are the sorts of things I think you should be thinking about unknown. So that's my answer to your question. Oh, alright. I'm going to remute the chat now that we have a whole pack more questions. So, Darkly NK says, would this Zerg style of central control from a 2-hatch opener be viable on Destination? Let's think about that a little bit. I mean, I can't see a reason why not. I mean, especially if you take the left side, you can take your high ground expansion, and you go straight for Lurkers, you take the high ground expansion, then you take that back expansion, you keep adding on Mutalisks, and you really abuse the fact that 1, you have super thin bridges at your natural, and 2, you have the Terran has to attack up a bridge to hit your other natural. And you can easily use Mutalisk Micro to combat that. So I think it's completely fine on Destination. I would love to see more people play like this on Destination, actually. Oh yeah, so Jugan asked the key question. Jugan says, if we found ourselves in a position similar to Calm, what do you suggest we do to gather ourselves? First of all, start playing more slowly. It's really easy to give into your adrenaline and sort of like, but you need to take a step back, and in a sense, you need to distance yourself from the game. What actually, physiologically happens with adrenaline is you start getting tunnel vision. Because here's the biological theory behind it. That, it's documented that when people are walking around, I'm sort of aware of what's going on. So if I'm crossing a street, I'm aware of cars that are kind of moving around here and people behind me and cars coming and bicycles and whatnot. But if suddenly I think a car's coming around the corner, the brain shuts everything out and zeroes only in on that car. And that's why people, right before they have accidents, say that time slowed down. When really what's happening is their focus on that one event is being heightened. And what happens is that as an organism, the body thinks, oh my god, I need to ignore everything else and focus only on this one thing because this is the thing that I need to make sure doesn't kill me. So, unfortunately, we don't want that in StarCraft. And what happens is when you're looking at the screen, slowly, literally, vision-wise, you will lose track of your money in the corner and of the minimap in the bottom corner. And really, when your eyes lose track of the minimap, suddenly your brain shuts down and you have real problems seeing what the scope of the game is, being aware of everything else. So what I actually start to do is when I get really nervous, I turn my head and look around the screen. I don't even look at the screen. I kind of time to make sure nothing horrible is happening, and then I look around a little bit and I physically turn my head and focus all my attention on the minimap. Tons of focus on the minimap, because just seeing those little dots of what my troops are doing with that sort of movement helps me know exactly what I need to be doing. A lot of focus on the minimap, in my vision, is the key to really focusing on that sort of thing, to make sure that you don't get shaken up. And also, if you have a mid-game plan, which I talk tons about, that helps a bunch to just say, okay, what is my plan? How have I won in all my other games? Let me do that. I like this question by Bagel. Bagel asks, what are the advantages and disadvantages of Calm's strategy compared to standard Zerg play? The advantage is that you get mid-game controls. You can deal with drops a little bit better. You get the opportunity to flank and just kill off the mid-game army that way. The danger is that if you flank improperly or if you lack patience, that you can lose. When you try to do that mid-game flank, you lose all your units, and then you have no way to hold off the mid-game push, and you instantly lose. That's why people kind of like Defilers, is that if I have, 8 Lurkers and 20 Zerglings and a Defiler, I've held off the Terran's push. If I have 2 Lurkers and 5 Zerglings and a Defiler, I've still held off the mid-game push, because Defilers are so sweet. Obviously, you're going to have more problems in the latter case, in terms of pushing back and maintaining that defense, but... So that I would say is some things to think about. Also, you get less of an opportunity to put a ton of pressure back on your opponent in the mid game to win. So, for instance, if you get Defilers really quickly, you can occasionally win the game at like 12, 13 minutes. But if you go for a big mid-game army, it might be like 15, 16 minutes for you to win. But we don't care when we win. We only care that we win. So that's something to think about. So, Ipone asks, let me just see this. Ipone's asked, recently a lot of Protoss has been getting destroyed by Terran and then managed to come back to victory with just stasis. Are Terrans doing something wrong? Although that's a good question, I want to stick it to just Zerg versus Terran stuff for now. I think it's just because, to answer it very briefly, I think that getting Arbiters that early to the point where a lot of stasis does do damage requires sacrificing the early economy. And a lot of times, even though Terrans seem to be doing well, the Arbiters sort of catch up in terms of mana and are able to do stasises that stop the pushes. I'd have to see some more specific games, but really, things seem normal. I don't think Terrans are really doing anything wrong. I think it's other things that actually cause them to lose instead of the stasis. So Hazmat asks, when Fantasy dropped the bottom right expansion, he ignored the drones and just targeted the hatchery. Would it have been more hurtful if he had lost his drones? I think always. It can't ever be bad to hit drones. I think it's that there were so many Firebats there that were probably having some difficulty getting all the way to the drones that he just went, whatever, I'm going to go kill off this hatchery. Because also if you kind of keep back and keep your Firebats or your Marines together, it's a lot easier to kill off Zerglings and other mobile units that are trying to kill the drop. If you run ahead with the Firebats to kill off the drones, you risk losing them to a Lurker or something like that, and then you just have 3 Marines and a Medic, which are going to die instantly. So I think it's less targeting the hatchery versus the drones, as opposed to keeping all the units together, and the hatchery is the only available target after you've done that. Okay, so iLald says, Fantasy was only on 2 base the whole game, and he lost to 5 bases with 4 base gas Zerg. So this clearly is Calm's fault. Do you think Calm should have gone Ultralisk? I never think the solution is to just go Ultralisk. I mean, naturally, there's going to be a time where you have enough money to do that, and I'm pretty sure that Calm was very low on money, given the sorts of things that he was building. I think what basically happened is I think Calm was about to hit the point where he was going to make a handful of Ultralisks and just win the game like that. He was about to get there, and he just needed to focus a little bit longer until he could do that. So in a sense, I would say that if Calm was able to get to Ultralisk, yeah, he would have won the game. I don't think the reason he lost is because he didn't get Ultras. I think he wasn't quite able to get them given his gross, horrible, icky, yucky failures that depressed me a bunch. So Amoeba says, in the basic gist of the game, the chat just scrolled right past Amoeba's question. So, the basic gist of the game is that Calm should have contained and solidify his 5 base to 2 base advantage instead of playing super aggressively. I actually read that wrong. He asked if that was the basic gist. Yes, I really think that anytime you're going for mid-game control, you should not get over-eager and try to kill your opponent ASAP. I think that's super dangerous. And honestly, I think what you'll find, especially if you're doing this style and you try it, skew way to the side of being passive and only push with Defilers. Make that your rule. And what will happen is you'll be amazed at how much easier it is to win the game if you just wait till the 18-minute mark to win it, as opposed to maybe winning it at the 13-minute mark with a big attack. And I think it's very easy to kind of confuse the mindsets of doing something super aggressive, like 2-Hash Muta into Defiler and Lurkers really fast, and to confuse that aggressive mindset with the more passive mindset that's demanded with a really big army. So yeah, Amoeba, I think you're dead on the money there. I think that's exactly the way to put it, is to just be a little bit more passive and use your big army to control the middle until you can get the real push units to break the front, like Defilers. So Zorch says, what do you think of Calm Spire placement? Oh, that's something I didn't mention, so that's good to bring up. Is a build like Calm's accessible to a D plus C minus level player? So there's 2 questions in there. So what do I think about Calm Spire placement? A lot of times you place it at the front so that your opponent doesn't see it, but it looks like he placed it so his opponent would see it. Honestly, I wouldn't obsess too much about that. As long as you get it built, I think is the important thing. Because honestly, when you're playing against a good enough player, he's going to know what you're doing anyways. And do I think it's accessible to a D plus C minus level player? Absolutely. I think every strategy is accessible to all players, with the exception of Vionic. Don't do that till you're like A minus. But I think that the big issue, if you're trying to do it at a low level, is being comfortable controlling really huge armies and just being patient. Defilers are really difficult to use, so that's the thing you need to work on if you're doing some super aggressive style of play, where you do an ultra-fast tech to Defiler. But if you're trying to do something this style, focus a lot on being very calm, being very patient, and having good macro, and controlling your units very, very well. I think that's the main focus if you're a low-level player. Rodrigo asks, as Terran, how do you fight against the critical mass of ultras using a bio build? Or is it not to let it happen at all? What about maps like Outsider? That is the exact way to put it. The counter to dealing with any weird mix of units that you're having trouble with, such as a bunch of Ultralisks or something like that, is less what the right unit combination is, and more of, can I stop this from happening at any point anyways? A really great example of this is Jaedong versus Fantasy on Outsider, where Jaedong spawns at the top right, and Fantasy spawns at the bottom right. So Jaedong, he ended up doing pretty much like a rush for Ultras, didn't even really do any Mutalisk harass in the mid-game. And Fantasy was very, very aggressive with Jaedong, so Jaedong got a decent enough economy, so he got a decent amount of Ultralisks. So again, I'm not quite saying that you need to kill Zerg before you get Ultras or you lose. What I'm saying is you need to keep his economy down so that when Ultras do pop out, there's not that many of them. It's kind of manageable. And what ended up happening is, as time went on, Fantasy, who was slowly building an economy, added on more factories and went back to building tanks. I guess that's the main way to sort of match the Zerg player with Ultralisks. And even if your opponent is not going Ultralisks, you still want to be adding those tanks on later in the game. So in other words, your order goes, first open up Marines, and then tech up to a vessel while getting tanks into your first push. Then you transition over to just Medic Marines and just vessels. And then at later stages of the game, you keep getting a lot of Medic Marine, a lot of vessels, and you get a few factories more to make a bunch of tanks. That's the way that you end up dealing with that. And the game I just said, Fantasy vs. Jaedong on Outsider, is a perfect example of that. I will take this question. This seems reasonable. Dr. Helvetica says, Calm's game against Fantasy was lost due to his mistakes in the OSL as well. Can you compare the two games in terms of how Calm played? So I will, because there seems like two different kinds of chokes. In this game, the one that we just watched, I feel like Calm's mistake was that he got shaken up. I think he had this big grand game plan, and probably in practice had done the little things like never letting a drop hit the ground, never losing an expansion. And what ended up happening is when he was playing here, he suddenly lost a base, and he was just like, oh my god, that never happens in practice. Ugh. And it was probably like, oh my god, I hope I don't lose, and then started thinking that, and that poisoned all his decision-making for the remainder of the game. So that was kind of ugh. What happened in the other game is I think Calm made some really stupid mistake, like one real simple mistake that just basically screwed him. I distinctly remember a game on, what was that map? It was this really awful map that I'm not going to remember the name of, because it was only around for a brief period of time before they threw it right out. But it was a game of Savior against Firebat Hero. And Firebat Hero obviously was up a huge number of games against Savior. Excuse me, I think it won like his last 4 games against Savior. So when Savior was playing this, in the replay, he researched speed for Hydralisks instead of Lurkers. So in the game, he barely didn't get the Lurkers out in time. And if he had just gotten Lurkers on time, he would have been fine, and the game probably would have progressed normally, and Savior may have won. But Savior clearly made this awful mistake that ended up losing him the game. And I think that's pretty much what happened in Calm vs. Fantasy on Eye of the Storm, is Calm probably missed Lurker, or did something weird that just screwed him, and then he was just like, oh god, and tried to play it out. Didn't matter. Didn't end up working, so that was that. I'm going to take this and then one more question, because we've just about now hit an hour. So I lost track of the question. Yeah, there we go. XSebT says, I couldn't help but notice the difference in the player's brightness settings in the first-person view. Is this just personal preference, or are there pros and cons? I always prefer way bigger brightness because I can see the mini-map better. Yeah, I like that question. Obviously preference, but try really upping the brightness. Not so much that it burns, a hole in your retina, but, give it a shot because I like being able to see the mini-map. I will take this last question, and that will wrap it up. So go ahead and halt the flood of questions. So Ideas says, do you think part of Calm's game plan was to get Guardians? Because he did get that +1 carapace upgrade for the Mutalisks. What I would say is, I don't know if it was necessarily part of his game plan, but I think that would have been a solid transition. I really would. I love seeing Guardians anyways, but also let's go ahead and take a brief look at this map. If we have these bases held, and we push with a big Lurker Ling army to here, not only are we getting ready to defend this, and we can defend this thing just by moving up here, but also our Mutalisks can morph into Guardians and help us push up this lane and then straight over into the natural. Unfortunately, Calm lost all his Mutalisks right there to some mid-game attack that probably wasn't going to do anything anyways. Again, a lot of the reason why I'm like, yeah, don't do mid-game attacks like that with this big army. Because, you don't want to just toss your Mutalisks away for nothing. Mutalisks are useful units, especially if you transition them into Guardians. So I think even if you got a later Defiler, but got these Guardians as well, and how do you spend the fact that you don't have very much gas? Well, you make Zerglings from your 1,000 hatcheries that you were able to pump out. Seems great to me. I would have loved to see that. I've done it. It's awesome. Give it a shot. And so that is going to wrap up Day 9 Daily number 25. So tomorrow we're going to be seeing Movie vs. Stork, because I've wanted to see a Protoss vs. Protoss, and it was a really cool game to watch. So I'm really pumped up to do an analysis of that. It was drastically different from the... who played? It was Gosi Flying vs. Backhoe, I believe, was the last one that we ended up watching. No, it's Han vs. Backhoe. Excuse me, that's what it was. Han vs. Backhoe. Very, very different game from that one. It was the Movie vs. Stork that we're going to see tomorrow was very, very aggressive. And most importantly, Tuesday and Wednesday, we're going to be reviewing your guys' replays. I'm going to be loading up your replays. Please tune in to see if I selected yours, because I have about 25 submissions right now. If you want to make a submission, go ahead and do that. Just PM me a link to your replay and why I should watch it. And we'll end up watching 2 or 3 of them. And I'll do a wide variety of techniques when analyzing the replay, such as pausing and taking off vision, watching it from just one player's point of view, watching it from the enemy's point of view, all these sorts of things I think will be really, really useful. So, yeah, thanks so much for tuning in, everyone, and tune in tomorrow, and especially on Tuesday and Wednesday to see your replays get chosen. Cheers, everybody.